Hey, today we are going to look at how to inspect our fall protection lanyard and our fall protection harness. So I have a lanyard here. This is actually my lanyard, and one of the things I want to show you when we're looking at this is really how clean it is. There is a little bit of marking here on this piece of wraparound protection right on the label itself, I guess you could say. And really, the idea here is I use this a lot, and as you can see, it's still pretty clean. And the reason being is I don't abuse it. I don't throw it on the ground. I don't throw it in the back of my truck. I actually take pretty good care of it, and I make sure that I clean it up after each use because, again, this is the life-saving device. When I'm 5 stories above the ground and the only thing below me is concrete and some rebar or other things like that, I do not want to find myself at the bottom of the ground. So I want to take care of this. And one of the things that we have to do is do a full inspection of our lanyard. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you that on the lanyard itself, all the newer lanyards, if you have a really old one, you may not have this. And that's a good indication that it's time to go ahead and replace it. But when you have this little protective flap here, and when you open it up, it's the label information from the manufacturer. And the manufacturer is going to tell you here the capacity of your lanyard and also give you some inspection stamps here. So what you can see is I have the date and the initials that I can put on the inspection. So right here on the label, it's going to say ANSI 130 to 310 pounds. OSHA capacity is 425 pounds. And the bottom line there is this is the capacity that this lanyard can hold. And I really don't want to go up to this OSHA 425. I want to stick in the ANSI rating because it is lower, and I always want to err on the side of caution. So all of my tools, my clothes, my boots, my body weight has to fall within this 310 pound range. This lower end is the 130. And what this really tells us is that, especially on a self-retracting lanyard, if we don't meet that minimum weight of 130, it's not going to engage the self-retraction lanyard. So now on this case, it's not a big deal because it's just a piece of webbing. There's no self-retracting device to it. But when I do my inspection, you'll see here it says inspect by a competent person every 6 months. And I want to make sure I'm doing an inspection of this lanyard every time I use it. So I want to look over everything that's on the lanyard. This little checklist is for those every 6 months. And you can see here, you have plenty of boxes for every 6 months. And the idea is that when those boxes run out, the lanyard's no good either. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, but I'm going to start at the one end of the lanyard here. I'm going to start with the carabiner, and I'm just going to look at the carabiner, and I'm going to go ahead and squeeze it. So I have this back end, this bottom piece here. So I want to see this bottom portion. I'm going to squeeze up, and I'm going to squeeze this down, and I'm just going to make sure that that locks in. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze without squeezing the back end here. I'm going to squeeze this, I'm going to push on it, I'm going to make sure that that stays engaged. I'm going to make sure that this kicks back out. So it should pop back out, and this should pop back out as well. So once I click this in, they should both pop back out. So that's the first thing I want to look at. The next thing I want to look at is this little loop in here, right? The bowl of the carabiner, the throat of the carabiner. So if we're looking at crane and hoist, we're going to call this the throat. And that's where this piece opens up. The idea here is this is our connecting point on our harness, and I'll show you that in a second. But I want to make sure that this piece here actually is nice and rounded and hasn't been bent, so I haven't fallen on it. As you'll see, there's no impact indicator on this particular lanyard because it is kind of made to take multiple hits. But the idea here is I want to make sure that snaps back in place. I want to do the same on the other side as well. And then I want to go over the entire lanyard. So I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to kind of bring my carabiner down so I can look at the sides of this loop to make sure that they're okay. I'm going to look at the wear and tear on the interior of this loop. So if we can see that in there, it still looks good. And then I'm going to start looking at all the threads. And I'm going to have to open this up. Don't skip this piece, right? You want to open this up and you want to look at your threads here and turn it to the side and make sure that this is still good, that it's not opening here, and that the threads are good on this side, which in this case everything is. And I'm just going to go ahead and work all the way down my lanyard, and I'm feeling here as well. So I'm kind of feeling along the interior of the lanyard to make sure that this web coating around it, right, the cover of the actual lanyard is still, the cover can hide a couple things. So I'm feeling in here to make sure that everything's okay. I'm visually inspecting, I'm looking for abrasions, cuts, nicks, and I'm going over really every single centimeter, but every single inch of this. And I'm gonna get down here into my buckle, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to kind of extend this out so I can look in here and just make sure that everything's okay. And I'm going to pull back this piece, and I'm going to slide down the little stopper so that I can see in here as best as possible. And everything's looking pretty good. I'm going to go down this in a piece of the lanyard. I'm going to look inside here. I'm going to slide my carabiner down and see where the edges are, that they're okay. Again, feeling along this lanyard. And again, I'm going to check all of this side's threading, and the inside, I'm going to take my finger and I'm just going to push in here and see if I can separate that at all. Everything's okay there. And then I'm going to check this carabiner as well. And I'm just going to make sure that it snaps back out, that everything snaps back out. Look at both sides. It's looking good and clean. And I know you guys are saying, you really haven't used that much. Trust me, I have. I just take really good care of it. Partly because I'm the fall protection specialist out in the field, and I need to make sure that I'm setting a good example for my crew. The other thing is, I don't keep these lanyards very long. I will ditch them quite frequently and get a new one just to stay safe. So that's our lanyard inspection. Now, I'm going to drop this off, and we're going to pick up our fall protection harness. And our fall protection harness is the exact same thing. I'm just going to kind of spread it out here, take a good look at it, kind of get it straightened out. And these are always a mess. For some odd reason, they just are a mess. So I'll get this in the direction that I would normally hang it, and you can see my leg loops and everything in here. But the bottom line is, to do the fall inspection harness, it's the same process. We're going to start by looking at the webbing itself. Now, I want to make sure that you understand this nylon, synthetic webbings, this type of webbing on your fall protection harness on your lanyard. If you've looked at rigging equipment, you'll know that if you get a little cut or a little abrasion in here, right, it reduces the strength of this web by up to 50%, sometimes a little bit more. So that's very important, especially when your life is the object that is hanging in the webbing. So what I want to do, I want to start right here again. If we look at our lanyard, we have a couple things. We have our manufacturer's tag, which every lanyard and every harness, I said lanyard on this, but this is actually the harness. So every lanyard, every harness has to have this manufacturer's tag on it. And again, we'll see the 130 pounds to 310 pounds is our weight. We'll see in here the date of the manufacturer, February 2018, the capacity by OSHA, the capacity by ANSI, the material that this is made of, polyester. And if I flip this over, I have again my inspection dates and initials of who the competent person is doing these inspections. So with this, we'll leave that open. You also have this impact indicator. So if you can see that, you can see here on the harness, they have a little red thread. It's been sewed into this harness and it's been tripled over. And when you have an impact, you have a hit on this, this thread, the red thread, is going to break apart. It's going to pull apart, and this impact tag is going to be hanging there, and you're going to see something up here that tells you don't use this anymore. So as long as this impact indicator, the thread's still good, I have one on each shoulder, thread's still good. I'll look at all these sides and make sure that the tag's not showing anything that says do not use. So that's the first thing I want to check, okay? I'll usually start right here at our manufacturer's tag, and I'm going to go up and around and down my harness, and again, I'm going to check basically every single centimeter of this harness, and I'm going to be checking the edges. I'm going to be looking for frays and abrasions on the face of our webbing here, right? So all along here, I'm going to be checking the edges, all of our threads, and I'm going to be looking at all of the connection points. Now, when we get here to this area with which we have a piece of kind of rubberized plastic that is basically connecting and keeping our harness properly positioned, this is not too, it is important, but the importance is not as much as the rest of it. So you might have a little bit of abrasion or something on your rubberized plastic. That can be okay, but you have to watch it. If it is inside one of these openings, then it can start to cut or abrade your harness material. And if that starts to happen, remember what I just said, it reduces the capacity, the maximum capacity of this harness. So I am going to start, and I'm just going to go down, and I'm going to be looking at every single, basically, centimeter of this harness, and I'm going to be looking at the front, the back, and I'll just do also not only a visual, but I'm going to do a little feel. I'm going to take my index finger and my thumb, and I'm going to try and draw it along the line of my harness and just feel for things. Is there any little piece of or sliver of metal that got caught in there? Is anything catching on my finger? Is it smooth? Does it feel good? Do I feel any abrasions? I'm going to get up here to my basically D-ring, or my connection point for my lanyard, and I'm going to just take a look in here. There should be, if you can kind of see down in here, there's a little piece of plastic that is wrapped around the metal to keep it from abrading on the harness material. That should still be there, and it should be circular. If you start to see that it's bent or cracked or torn, then that's an indicator that we need to take a look at that. This piece is bent specifically, so if you look at the side view here, you see that it is bent out a little bit. It was manufactured that way. It's supposed to be this way, so that's okay, but this is something that you would look at to see if this is twisted, bent, or otherwise deformed. But I'm going to look at this, and again, I'm going to give it a feel as well and go all the way around. It feels good. I don't see any cracks. I don't see any stress fractures or anything of this nature. I'm going to come back down my harness, and again, I'm looking at every single little stitch. I'm feeling here. I'm checking all my stitching here to make sure that everything's still intact. I'm looking on the inside just to see if there's anything there. I'm feeling as I go down, and now I'm getting to the buckle. So I'm going to unbuckle these. I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to check my buckles. This is the same thing if you're looking at a playground. You want to look at the interior of your S hooks and your C hooks, right? You want to make sure that they're not deformed or otherwise problematic, right? No stress fractures or anything like that. Again, I'm going to move my harness through so I can look at not only the buckle, but the interior of this harness to make sure that there's not too much pull. This is, again, plastic here, so that's okay. And I'm just going to go down this particular side. All right, so now I've done that side. And you might go over this a couple times because the harness does start to get a little tricky because you're flowing from one piece. Oh, now I'm at the bottom of the leg. Oh, I got to go over to the seat. And again, checking all of my threads here. Flipping it over, checking my threads, checking my seat. Going up, unbuckling this here as well. And again, spread it out. Take a look in there. Everything's looking good. All right, check this buckle. And I'm just kind of going through and making sure everything's connected. Everything's looking good, right? Now I'm gonna just kind of flip this around and look at the back side of this. And again, I'm giving it the feel. I'm giving it the visual. And I'm looking for anything in here that could be problematic. Do that over your entire harness, and that is how you do the inspection. Now, if you're not explaining this, you can do it a lot quicker, but don't skip it. Don't ever skip it, because this is, in fact, your life-saving device. Remember, personal protective equipment is your last line of defense. Once you fall, it's too late, and it happens in a second. So make sure you're doing these inspections. Make sure that you're having all of your equipment inspected by a competent person every 6 months, and make sure that you throw this away at the end of the expiration date, right? So when it expires by the manufacturer, toss it, okay? So that's it. That's how to inspect your harness and your lanyard. Thanks, and have a great day, and we'll see you on another training here very shortly.